We need to make sure that we don't fall for something like this ever again. We need to make sure that the next Bernie Sanders, because it may not actually be Bernie Sanders, the next progressive type movement that they try to throw in our face and push our way through the Democratic Party, we need to make sure we do not fall for this again. And I'm going to go into the message here about Bernie Sanders. And the reason why we're going to go here is because you know the midterm elections are tomorrow. Bernie Sanders was just recently in Philadelphia doing a rally to encourage people to come out to vote. And I listened to some of his speech and I was like, oh, this sounds a little familiar. And it started to make me concerned because it started to make me feel like people actually could have hope for Bernie again. And you should not. And we're going to do a little case study here of Bernie Sanders' playbook. So we're going to go back and we're going to go forward. And I'm going to show you what you need to pay close attention to so that we do not fall for something like this again. And we're going to get started with this debate here, this one-on-one with Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. There are two things I want to point out here in this debate that I actually caught when this debate happened. And I'm surprised more people didn't call this out. Let's get started with the debate.
Make the case for why a revolution is not what the country needs or wants.
We have problems we have to solve now. Now, what's a revolution going to do? Disrupt everything in the meantime?
That part right there. What's a revolution going to do? Joe Biden says disrupt everything in the meantime. That was Joe Biden letting you know they don't want a disruption. And that's what a revolution does. It is supposed to disrupt. They don't want that. You see what I mean? I want you to pay close attention to what Joe Biden says here when he goes into Medicare for all, and where I think Bernie Sanders really failed here in his response to Joe Biden. But I don't think that was an accident. I think that was on purpose. Let's get to that.
Look, the senator talks about his Medicare for all. He still hasn't told you how he's going to ever get it passed. He hasn't told you how, in fact, there's any possibility of that happening. He hadn't told you how much it's going to cost. He hadn't tell you how it's going to apply. It doesn't kick in for 4 years, even after it passes. We want a revolution. Let's act now. Pass the Biden healthcare plan, which takes Obamacare, restores all the cuts made to it, subsidizes further, provides for lower drug prices, make sure that there's no hidden bills, make sure that we invest, I want to invest $50 billion in dealing with underlying diseases that are of great consequence, diabetes, Alzheimer's, and cancer. Make sure that we have a Medicare option that's in a public option providing Medicare for us. We can do that now. I can get that passed.
By the way, if you pay close attention here, I haven't seen Joe Biden this sharp since he's been in office. The cognitive decline is real. Now, he says if you want a revolution, you should vote for the Biden health plan. How is that a revolution when it doesn't even cover everybody? Does Bernie Sanders push back on that?
I can get that done if I'm president of the United States of America. That will be a fundamental change, and it happens now. I can tell you from experience, being a significant consumer of healthcare with my sons, my family, all the things we've gone through. What people want is hope, and they need it now, not 4 years from now. And Bernie still hasn't told us how he's going to pay for it. We're talking about a $30+ trillion plan.
Not quite true.
Senator Sanders.
Look, let's do something that is very rarely done in the Congress. Let's do something that the media doesn't do. Let's talk about the reality of American life. Why is it that over the last 45 years, despite the huge increase in productivity, and technology, the average worker today is not making a nickel more in real dollars. Why is it that over the last 30 years, the richest 1% have seen a $21 trillion increase in their wealth, bottom half of America, $900 billion decline in their wealth? Why is it that we are the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people as a human right? Why are we the only major country not to have paid medical and family leave? Why do we give tax breaks to billionaires when 500,000 people are homeless today? And it comes down to something, Jake, we don't talk about. The power structure in America. Who has the power? And I'll tell you who has the power. It's the people who contribute money, the billionaires who contribute money to political campaigns, who control the legislative agenda. Those people have the power. And
now he's pointing out the billionaires who donate to political campaigns. But watch what he leaves out, which I felt was very significant for someone to mention, and he doesn't mention it.
if you want to make real changes in this country, if you want to create an economy that works for all, not just the few, if you want to guarantee quality health care to all, not make $100 billion in profit for the healthcare industry, you know what you need? You need to take on Wall Street. You need to take on the drug companies and the insurance companies and the fossil fuel industry. You don't take campaign contributions from them. You take them on and create an economy that works for all.
You want to do
What Bernie Sanders did here was he basically just repeated what he had been saying during the Democrat primary debates throughout that election season. That same speech, I heard it over and over and over again. What he did not do is he did not attack Joe Biden when it comes to the issue of healthcare and donors. Why didn't Bernie Sanders, during his pushback there, why didn't he push back on Joe Biden and say, well, excuse me, Joe, but you take money from Big Pharma? Why didn't he do that? Why didn't Bernie Sanders say, well, of course you're going to say it's too expensive or we don't know how to pay for it because you're also in the pocket of Big Pharma? Why didn't he do that? Tell me. Why? When Tulsi Gabbard attacked Kamala Harris, she attacked Kamala Harris directly on her record, right? If we are talking about Medicare for all, and we're talking about providing health care for everyone in this country, and Joe Biden is telling you that you never explained how you were going to pay for it. Obviously, we knew that was a lie. If you had been watching the Democratic primary debates, he mentioned that multiple times. If Joe Biden is telling you that you don't even know how to make it pass, why didn't Bernie Sanders say, well, this can be done by executive order? Why didn't he say that? But more importantly, he did not attack him directly. He pointed out the billionaires, which we all know about. He said that over and over again. He pointed out Big Pharma, campaign contributions, the same line that we've heard him say over and over and over again, but he did not attack him directly in reference to Joe Biden being in the pocket of Big Pharma. That's a problem. These are the kind of things we need to pay attention to. Why he go so easy on him here? Medicare for all was like Bernie Sanders' thing. Why he go easy on Joe with that? Joe Biden was his friend. You mean to tell me he didn't know that Joe Biden was taking money from Big Pharma? I knew that. This was on purpose. And I go back to this debate and I say, Bernie was not really trying to win here. He was stronger during the Democratic primary debates than he was during this debate. This debate was not his strongest debate. And I think that was on purpose. I wouldn't be surprised if he was told not to go too hard on Joe. Let's go back in.
that, do what I proposed over 30 years ago. Federally fund all elections. No private contributions in the election process. If you want to do that, join me. Join me in my constitutional amendment that I've been proposing. Maybe you and I can work on that together because that would fundamentally change it. And the implication is I've not accepted a contribution from anybody over $2,800, number one. My average contribution is $44. Just this month, I've raised $33 million, average contribution $51. The idea that this is Bernie's implication is somehow I'm being funded by millionaires. Bernie, look, in the last Super Tuesday and before that, Bernie outspent me 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to 1. And I still won. I didn't have any money. And I still won.
Senator Sanders?
We know damn well Joe Biden was taking corporate money, but okay.
It's good that you had an idea 30 years ago. I don't want to join you. Why don't you join me? Why don't you?
I don't want to join you. Why don't you join me? But he did join him. Do you see? He did join him. When Bernie Sanders told you to vote for Joe Biden, before he even suspended his campaign and he started telling people to vote for Joe Biden, he had already decided to join him. Do you see this? I don't want to join you. Why don't you join me? But he did join him. So if you didn't want to join Joe Biden, Bernie, why did you join him?
To get rid of the super PAC that you have right now, which is running very ugly negative ads about me, by the way. Don't laugh, Joe. That's just the truth. And they got 2 other super PACs running ads against us. Why don't you just say right now, go on television and say, hey, you know what? I think in the past, Joe, if I'm not mistaken, you condemned super PACs. Is that correct?
You get rid of the 9 super PACs you have?
I don't have 9 super. I don't have any
have
super
9.
PACs.
You want me to list them?
No, yeah, you go ahead and list them.
Okay, come on. Give me a break.
No, I won't give you a break on this one, Joe. You condemned super PACs. You got a super PAC is running negative. But here's the point. This is the point. In the richest country in the history of the world, half of our people should not be struggling to put food on the table.
Same talking point. Same talking point.
And the reason for that is you have a political structure in which big money interests not only dominate the political system, but dominate our economy as well. Somebody makes a decision, we're going to shut down a factory in America, we're going to move to China, we're going to move to Mexico, pay people starvation wages there. This is an issue that has got to be ultimately dealt with. Who has the power in America? Are we content with so few exercising so much power when so many people have given up on the political process?
I proposed a significant change in the tax code, and I've been proposing it for a long, long time. Number one. Number two, it's not just about taxing the super wealthy. It's about making sure everybody pays their fair share. For example, I can pay for my whole health care plan by changing the way in which we deal with capital gains. People should pay their capital gains based on what their income tax is, and not at 20%. That would raise $800 billion, pay for my entire medical health care plan, which would cover everyone.
Who looks sharper in this debate to you, Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders? You see, at the time, I couldn't see it. At the time, I did not see it because I was so, like, yay, Bernie. I really wanted Bernie to win. And I realized when I went back and watched this, there were things that I missed and things that I overlooked. And I go back to this and I realized Bernie really was not as strong here as I thought he was when I saw it the first time live on TV. Joe Biden has not been this sharp since. He hasn't. Now, I'm not going to play the entire video here, but I do want to go ahead to the next clip because, again, we're continuing the case study of the Bernie Sanders playbook. Now, remember what we just listened to. He did not call out Joe Biden's funding when it comes to the pharma industry. He did not push back on Joe Biden in reference to, well, he did kind of push back on that, but so he didn't push back on him in reference to the big pharma funding. He didn't call him out specifically in reference to that. And another key takeaway here from this clip is that he told Joe Biden, I don't want to join you, you join me. But he joined him anyway. Why would you join someone you don't want to join? Now we're going to go back to his 2016 campaign when he told people to vote for Hillary. Now, this was Bernie Sanders in Philadelphia. And I want you to hear the audience reaction. This is just all a reminder. This is part of the playbook. How every time he ends up telling you to vote for the establishment corporate Democrat. Listen to this.
Immediately, right now, we have got to defeat Donald Trump. And we have got to elect Hillary Clinton and Tim Kaine.
That was the first time he sold out his movement. You hear all the boos? That was the first. We're going to go to the second time where he sells out his movement again. Listen to this.
This election is the most important in the modern history of this country.
Does that sound familiar? That's what he's saying right now. He said it in 2016. He said it in 2020. And he's saying it right now. This is all a part of his playbook. I'll let him finish.
In response to the unprecedented crises we face, we need an unprecedented response, a movement like never before, of people who are prepared to stand up and fight for democracy and decency and against greed, oligarchy, and bigotry.
Stand up and fight against greed, oligarchy, and bigotry. Now listen what he tells you to do.
And we need Joe Biden as our next president. Let me take this opportunity to say a word to the millions of people who supported my campaign this year and in 2016.
So he tells you to stand up to greed, oligarchy, right? He tells you to stand up to it. But then in the end, he tells you to vote for the same problem he told you to stand up to and fight against. Because Joe Biden is still very much, he's in the pocket of that same greed and oligarchy, his donors, his corporate donors, he's in that same pocket. So how are you going to tell all these young people who came out and to support you, how are you going to tell all these people to stand up against greed? And then you tell them to vote for the corporate candidate who's a part of the same greed you told them to fight against. This is a key element here that is a part of Bernie Sanders' playbook. He did it with Hillary Clinton as well. He called her corrupt. He said it was a lot of greed, right? Fight back against the billionaires. Fight back against corporate money in politics. But then he told you to vote for Hillary Clinton, who was just very much corporate and greedy. Same thing in 2020. Same thing. This will not change. Regardless if there is a Trump-like Republican or not. This is something that is a part of Bernie Sanders' playbook that at the end of the day, he is going to tell you to vote for the same corporate greed that he told you to fight against. And I say this because they are not going to let Bernie Sanders win. The DNC was never going to let him win. And it's important that people understand this. Because the next person that come through, it may not be Bernie Sanders, but they may have the same message as Bernie Sanders. And they'll run through the Democratic Party and they'll say they're progressive. And this time, it may be a black man, maybe a black woman. It may be AOC. And they'll use the same talking points. And then people will think, well, maybe if Bernie couldn't get it done, maybe they'll get in there where Bernie couldn't. They won't. On that message. They won't get in unless they sell out. You have to understand how the political system works. So they were never going to let Bernie Sanders in. They said so themselves. They can change the rules at any time. They did it during the Democratic primary debates. So at the end of the day, the people running through the Democratic Party as progressives, They are either going to do what Bernie telling you to do and vote for that corporate greed, or they're going to sell out themselves and become that corporate candidate in order to win. Now, here's the message that he delivered to his audience.
My friends, thank you for your trust, your support, and the love you showed Jane, me, and our family. Together, we have moved this country in a bold new direction, showing that all of us, black and white, Latino, Native American, Asian American, gay and straight, native born and immigrant, yearn for a nation based on the principles of justice, love, and compassion. Our campaign ended several months ago, but our movement continues and is getting stronger every day.
That part right there, he tells you that the movement continues. He did the same thing in 2016. Has the movement continued? No.
Of the ideas we fought for that just a few years ago were considered radical are now mainstream. But let us be clear. If Donald Trump is reelected, all the progress we have made will be in jeopardy.
What progress? What progress was made, though? Yeah, you educated people about the issues. You brought some of those issues to the forefront. But some people could say, so did Jill Stein. So what exactly was the progress? Do we have Medicare for all? No, we don't. Did they cancel all of student loan debt? No, they did not. Do we have paid family leave? Do we have paid sick leave? What was the progress?
At its most basic, this election is about preserving our democracy. During this president's term, the unthinkable has become normal.
And I'm going to stop right there. So Bernie Sanders is telling you that it's about preserving our democracy. That was in 2020. Does that sound familiar? Isn't that the same script that Ro Khanna and Bernie and AOC and all the other Democrat politicians have been using this year? You see how they continue the same script, guys? It's not new. Preserve our democracy. They run it on the same shit. Same thing. Now I'm going to take you to another clip here, because like I said, this is a playbook. They don't even come up with new material. Like they just pull out the same playbook. It's like if you're on a football team, right? And the football team, they have a playbook, and the coach is like, look, we're going to pull out that same playbook from last year, and we're going to use these plays. We might add in a couple of new ones, but for the most part, this is the playbook. This is what they do. Nothing has really changed because they using the same script. Same one. Now, there was something else I noticed about Bernie Sanders' campaign, and I did raise concern about this at the time. And even after he lost, I said, I told you he should have done this. Bernie Sanders did not have a reparations plan. Even Nina Turner, who was a part of his campaign in 2020, told him that he should have a reparations plan, that would be a mistake. If you're trying to get the African-American voters, you should have some type of reparations plan. Bernie Sanders didn't. He didn't want that. And I want to remind you of something, because Lucy mentioned something earlier when she came on. When you have a politician like AOC, like Lucy told you, she look out for her people, right? Bernie Sanders did the same thing. And I'm going to play this clip here, and you're going to see what I'm talking about. Now, this clip, this is from African Diaspora News Channel. Now, he touches on something really key here. And like I said, it was a mistake for him to not have a reparations plan. Even Marianne Williamson had a reparations plan. What does that tell you when it comes to Bernie Sanders and the African-American community? Listen to this.
Now, our biggest issue with Bernie Sanders, more than the other two candidates, and also Elizabeth Warren, she talked about she has some agreement with it, but she feels Native Americans need to be added. But we'll deal with Elizabeth Warren another time. Bernie Sanders has an emphatic no when it comes to reparations for African Americans. And he doesn't like to even talk about it. He gets a little bothered. But let's roll just some short clips of him and all his denials of reparations.
Your position specifically on reparations. I asked the question because Elizabeth Warren, Julian Castro, they've indicated they want
What does
to
that
support.
mean? What do they mean? I'm not sure that anyone's very clear. What I've just said is that I think we must do everything that we can to address the massive level of disparity that exists.
So I want to jump in here and I want to let you know, at the time I did not know that, but I found out later on that my suspicion was correct. Bernie Sanders said this on the Breakfast Club. He said this at the CNN town hall as well, that what do you mean when you say a reparations plan? Well, Bernie Sanders knew exactly what they were talking about when they asked about a reparations plan. And I know this because when I interviewed Cornel West about this, I asked him, why didn't Bernie Sanders have a reparations plan? And Cornel West broke it down for me. So he knew exactly what they were asking. Bernie Sanders just really didn't want to answer the question. And for me, looking back on it, like I said, this was a problem. Let's go back in
this country.
I'll tell you what they mean, because Elizabeth Warren has said black families have had a much steeper hill to climb. We need systematic structural changes to address that. Julian Castro has said, I have long thought that this country would be better off if we did find a way to do that, reparations.
Well, I agree with what Elizabeth said.
So you would support reparations?
But read what she said. What does that mean? She means, I think, I don't want to put words into her mouth, is what I said. Okay.
African Americans are starting to call for reparations for the many years of stolen labor through slavery. Is that something that you would support as president?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think it would be, first of all, its likelihood of getting through a Congress is nil. Second of all, I think it would be, very divisive.
So he said, no, he would not support it because it wouldn't get through Congress. And he also said that it would be very divisive. But Bernie Sanders had no problem supporting reparations for other groups in the past. Let's go on. Let's go on, because we're calling it all out tonight. I'm going to show you about this.
Why not support reparations then?
What do you mean by reparations?
By reparations for slave defenders.
I know, but what does that mean exactly?
Money.
Well, I think that right now our job is to address the crises facing the American people and our communities. And I think there are better ways to do that than just writing out a check.
I just wanted to recap.
But which communities was he referring to? See, these are the kind of things you have to go back and you really have to take a second look at. When he said our communities, which communities was he referring to? Because I want to be clear here, because some people, may not know about this, but I'm going to break this down for you for a second. Now, I'm not a reparations expert, but I know enough about it to tell you what it really means. General Sherman made a promise to African Americans in this country. That promise was 40 acres and a mule. That promise was never fulfilled. And because of that, African Americans struggle to adapt some type of generational wealth. 40 acres, that's land. Land is wealth. So this is why a lot of us, and especially even today, this is why a lot of us that are African American, we have no generational wealth because that promise was not fulfilled. Now, there are reparations experts that can tell you exactly what that would be equivalent to today. I recommend that you look them up, Yvette Carnell, Dr. Sandy Darity. Look into their research because they actually can break it down for you. But there was something suspect about this because, like I told you, he had no problem supporting it before for another group, just not for Black people.
That. Now, Bernie Sanders isn't for reparations at all for African Americans, but guess who he's okay with having reparations? His own people. See, if you had an issue about reparations, then you would take that no matter what position that you're in, whether it's your own people or someone else. But he was okay with it for his own people. Now let's go ahead and go to the computer real quick. And I want to show you how he was for reparations for his own people. So ladies and gentlemen, you're seeing here the Holocaust Rail Justice Act. Now, this is the reparations that Bernie Sanders was for, because as we know that he says an emphatic no when it comes to African Americans and their hurt and pain, but he says yes to his people. Now, this is the bill that he was pushing for. Now, it says a bill to ensure that the courts of the United States may provide an impartial forum for claims brought by United States citizens and others against any railroad organized as a separate legal entity arising from the deportation of United States citizens and others to Nazi concentration camps on trains owned or operated by such railroad and by the heirs and survivors of such persons. Now,
and notice the sponsor is Chuck Schumer. So notice again, he just told you Bernie Sanders pushed for this, but he wasn't even willing to support reparations for African Americans. Keep that in the back of your head, because there's something else I'm going to point out too.
Now, Charles Chuck Schumer, he sponsored that bill. Okay. Now, you may say, well, what Bernie Sanders has to do with this one? If we go to details here, co-sponsors, as you will see here, Bernie Sanders. So he co-sponsored this bill. Okay. And this is the bill that he wanted, and he wanted reparations for his people. We're going to prove that. So it just say in the summary of this is introduce a Holocaust Rail Justice Act grants U.S. District Courts original jurisdiction over any civil action for damages for personal injury or death that arose from deportation of persons to Nazi concentration camps between January 1, 1942 and December 31, 1944, and is bought by or on behalf of such person against a railroad that owned or operated the trains on which the persons were deported and that was organized as a separate legal entity, declares that no law limiting the jurisdiction of U.S. courts shall preclude any such action, and no such action shall be barred because a statute of limitations has expired, makes this act applicable to any action pending on or commenced after January 1, 2002. That's a direct Secretary of State to report to Congress on the status of access to wartime records and archives concerning the wartime activities of any such railroad that engaged in the deportation of such persons to Nazi concentration camps.
Now, how can you be for it for your people, but against it for African Americans? And this isn't the only thing. I mean, Elizabeth Warren, she tried to chime in here too. And like Elizabeth Warren, she wanted to come in and say, oh, well, we need to add, indigenous people to this too. By the way, we had a panel on RBN about this very same discussion with those who are indigenous. And I've heard this from multiple different indigenous people. They are not asking for reparations. But people want to add all these other different groups. This is important for people to understand. So this video, you can watch the entire video. It's called Bernie Sanders Supports Reparations, but for his people, not for Black people. And this isn't the only issue that I had a problem with Bernie Sanders that I really need to point out as well when it comes to African Americans. Bernie Sanders was against defunding the police. So you got two strikes, bud. You were against reparations. You were against defunding the police. Two issues attached to the Black community. But see, Bernie Sanders, when I did a deep dive, I realized Bernie Sanders, he wanted us to support the issues that help white communities, but he didn't want to support issues that helped Black communities. And so when people come on and they say, oh, well, Medicare for all is for everybody, or Medicare for all would greatly help the Black community. Bro, that's for everyone. When we're talking about issues that directly affect the Black community, Bernie Sanders was against it. And so I had to say something to myself there. And I had to ask myself a question. Because what I noticed, and he's doing this right now with this rally here in Philadelphia, he doing the same playbook. Bernie Sanders has a lot of African-American speakers, just like he had African-American people a part of his 2020 campaign. Bernie Sanders go do a rally with Public Enemy, show I'm down with the people, black people come out and vote for me. And at the same time, he was against the issues for your very community. And he's doing it again. If we go to this rally here in Philadelphia, I'm going to show you how they play us. I'm going to show you how they play us. Now, I'm going to get back to the speech in a minute. Let me put it on mute. We're going to go through this. We're not playing the whole thing. I just want to show you he's doing the same thing again. So look at the speakers. So here we go. We got city councilor members. There's a black woman. There's an Asian woman, right? Let's go on. I'm going to show you all of them. Look, here we go. Here's the speakers again. So you have Lloyd Salison Dean. I still believe he is also a person of color. I think so. So is she, right? Again, there's nothing wrong with diversity, but I want you to pay attention to what they're actually doing. Then we go on. I'm going to show you all these bad boys in Philly. Here we go again. Campaign director for Move On Rapid Response. Person of color, right? Let's keep going. Here's another one. Antonio, person of color, right? We're going to get through all of them until you get to Bernie Sanders, right? Maurice, African-American. Let's go on. There's another one. Person of color. This is how they play you, man. Look, this is the virtue signal. Here we go now. Here we go again. Christina, person of color. And you see all of this. Then you get to the performance. And what do you know? The female artist, African-American, right? Okay. So then we get to Bernie Sanders, and she performs for a while. Then we get to Bernie Sanders, his speech here. And he gonna say the same familiar shit that he was saying before. Now listen to this.
I want to tell you that which party controls the U.S. House, U.S. Senate, who your governor is of enormous consequence to every person in this room, every person in Pennsylvania. And let me tell you what is at stake in this campaign. A number of months ago, as I know all of you are aware of, the Supreme Court of the United States, a very right-wing extremist Supreme Court, came up with an abominable decision. And they said that women in America are too dumb to be able to control their own bodies. We disagree.
The same style of rhetoric leaves out the fact that the Democratic Party actually let it get to this point because they did not codify Roe v. Wade into law. They didn't even abolish the filibuster under Obama when they had the votes and the seats to do so.
And we're going to tell the Supreme Court and everybody else that that very personal decision is a decision of women, not of government. And by the way, I am quite confident that most of you know how babies are made. Men, this is your issue as well. Stand with the women.
So again, right off the bat, the first thing he discusses is abortion. And this is what the Democrats have been doing all year. The first thing you should be discussing is the economy and inflation. That is the number one issue on the polls for American voters. Abortion is not the number one issue, but they still doing the same thing.
This campaign is about whether your generation will be able to raise your kids and have grandchildren who will live in a state, a country, a planet that is healthy and is habitable. The last 8 years have been the hottest years ever recorded. It ain't going to get better unless we make it better. So if you don't want to grow up in a world with drought and floods, extreme weather disturbances, increased disease, poor people all over the world being forced to leave their homes because they don't have any clean water or they can't grow their crops, if you believe we have got to save the planet for future generations, let us have the courage to take on the greed of the fossil fuel industry and transform our energy system.
Sound familiar? Yes, it does sound familiar. He is in Philadelphia. Okay. So the candidates in Pennsylvania, it's John Fetterman and it's Dr. Oz. There's also Richard Weiss. He's running as Green Party candidate. He's there to get people to come out and vote for John Fetterman so they can keep or flip one of these seats in the Senate. Now, he just gave you a whole speech about climate catastrophe. Excuse me. He just gave you a whole speech about the climate catastrophe. And I just want to remind you that John Fetterman is pro-fracking. So how is bringing in, you see how neither one of them are a good option. How is bringing in John Fetterman going to prevent that crisis? How is that half-assed climate bill that was passed this year going to prevent climate crises or even put a dent in climate crisis? It does not. If you actually talk to climate scientists, they will explain to you that is nowhere near enough to even put a dent into it. But here's Bernie Sanders leading you to believe that that weak climate bill legislation that they just passed, and by you voting for John Fetterman, who's pro-fracking, he's here to convince you and make you believe that this is actually going to help the climate crisis in this country. And it is not. You're still going to have the droughts. You're still going to have other weather catastrophes. If you still have the military industrial complex in operation, this is not going to fix the issue. And Bernie Sanders knows that, but he's not going to tell you that.
And this campaign, it's not only about women's rights, it's not only about saving the planet, as important as all of that is. And this is something, to be very honest with you, I never imagined in my life that I would be saying as a United States Senator. And that is, this election is about saving the foundations of American democracy.
Sound familiar? Same thing he said in the clip I played for you in 2020. Same thing. He's been using the same playbook. Nothing has changed. I don't know if he's thinking about trying to run again or not, but I'm just telling you, there's some red flags that people need to really pay close attention to. Like, I look back on it and I really feel like a fool. I really do. Like, the fact that I even believed that Bernie Sanders was actually going to fight for us. He went right along with Joe Biden, right along. So that is the case there for Bernie Sanders. And there was something that I mentioned on Twitter the other day. When we go back to those issues of defunding the police and reparations, Bernie Sanders marched with Dr. King. Bernie Sanders was arrested because he was protesting segregated housing. There's pictures of that, right? Famous pictures. So Bernie Sanders knows about the inequalities that African Americans have in this country. He was a part of the civil rights movement. Bernie Sanders marched with Dr. King, and he sat there and he watched police officers beat people, sick dogs on Black people. And Bernie Sanders doesn't think we need to defund the police? That don't seem strange to you? You were a part of the movement where they were still seriously beating Black people, trying to kick Black people out on the street. And you were there and you watched this stuff happen, and you don't think they need to defund the police? The point that I'm trying to make to you is this, and especially if you're African American, please pay attention to this, because I never want to fall for this shit again. Every now and then, there may be a person that they put forward or that chooses to run, and they may have good intentions in the beginning. And then they get into the two-party system and they realize that they're going to have to go along with partisan politics if they actually want a chance. No matter how much grassroots money Bernie Sanders raised, the DNC was able to just change the rules if they wanted to, if need be. Obama could make a phone call and tell people to drop out of the race. Obama called Bernie Sanders and told him to take a step back and give it to Joe. And Bernie Sanders talked about a political revolution, and just like that, he backed out. Twice in a row. What I'm trying to warn you of is this: the next Bernie Sanders won't be Bernie Sanders. The next Bernie Sanders will be a black man or a black woman or Latina like AOC. And they're going to use more identity politics to really hope get the black vote to come out. Because the black vote has not been as strong as it has since Barack Obama. Since he still got the largest amount of the black vote till this day. So they see, okay, it don't really work with Bernie Sanders. You know, some African Americans weren't really feeling him. Again, like I just told you, they weren't really feeling Bernie, not feeling the reparations thing. That was part of the problem. So what they'll do is they'll dress up someone else who looks like us and run on the same policies and the same issues as Bernie Sanders, but they'll be corporate. And they may make you think that they're grassroots, but they will be corporate. They will be in the pocket of the DNC, and they will win. And when they win, they will turn on us just like all the others. And we would have once again given our vote to a candidate that we thought was going to really fight for the African American community and decided to cave. These are puppets. Some of them are pawns. And we cannot continue to fall for this game again. And if you do not believe me, mark my words, someone else will rise up and will be that person and will have that same appearance. And people will fall for it all over again. Watch. Now I want to play this audio here. And I played this on RBN, but I want to play it on this channel as well. Now this is from Phil Scott. Roger Meadows sent me this. And it's just a snippet that I want to play. Now he asked his dad, did the Democratic Party ever do anything for African Americans? I want you to listen to this bit here.
Have they done anything for black people in all the years that you have seen black people voting? Have they done anything for black people? Could you just name one thing that you could tell me concrete, like, yes, the Democrat Party has done this, and that, and this is why we vote for them so much. My father told me that the Democrat Party has done nothing for black people. He said that they come around every 2 years, knocking on your door, leaving flyers and all of that, going to your church, asking us to vote for them. And he said, after you vote for them, they disappear. You never see them again until 2 years later. Then here they coming back, saying the same thing. He said, you never see them in the community. You don't know really anything they're doing. And it's a perpetual cycle that's been happening for a long time. So I asked him, I said, well, why haven't nobody called this out? Why haven't nobody say, hey, what are y'all doing for us? He said, a lot of black people just think that's the thing to do.
Very important that you listen to that segment. It's called My Father Said Everything Fell Apart in the early 1970s, and Democrats don't care about black Americans. And I hate to tell some of you this, but that includes Bernie Sanders too. He was only willing to go so far. And just because he had black people that were part of his campaign, that didn't mean shit to me no more, because when it came down to the actual issues, he was not willing to go that far. Don't fall for it again, guys. Like I told you, next time it won't be Bernie Sanders. It'll be someone else, and they'll trick you again.